Woody Wommack, joined by Adam Gorney and our special guest, Zach Soskin, co-founder of Voltage. Zach, you do marketing, all types of stuff. You're helping us break down name, image, likeness. Adam Gorney has a huge series running next week. He talked to you for a few things. So first, let's talk to Adam. Boy, Adam, what did you learn? This was a crazy week. We've had conference calls. There's 100 stories in the admin. So give us, what was the biggest takeaway about players getting players getting paid?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. I went into this thinking that if someone at Texas A&M wanted to give a kid $100,000, he'd be more than welcome to do it, and it would be a free-for-all. And when you talk about free market value and all of those kinds of things and free market volume, it's not really going to be that. It's not going to be the Wild West. People aren't going to be able to pay for recruits. People aren't going to be able to pay big money once those kids get to campus. A lot of it is going to be in the responsibility of the players themselves to be able to market themselves. So they'll be able to make money. But it's still being decided if there's an NCAA board or a third-party board to really kind of review each transaction to see if it's a recruiting inducement, to see if it's pay for play. Those things will not be allowed. Players will be able to make money, but they're going to have to, let's say, really work for it in terms of having it justified by the NCAA. There's going to be a lot of oversight and overview. Things are still being figured out whether Congress is going to be involved in this in terms of writing legislation. But kids are going to be able to have the opportunity to run their own camps with their name on them, sell t-shirts, sell trading cards, show up in commercials, do social media events, all those kinds of things that Zach does for a living, that will be incorporated into it. But in terms of just paying a recruit because there's free market value or fair market value, or paying a player or promising players that they're going to make money once they get on campus and setting up deals for them, that's not how this is going to work.
So Zach, you work a lot with guys going into the NFL draft, helping them get deals and stuff like that. And we know there's money there, but to Adam's point, I mean, people think that like every player is all of a sudden going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars from boosters and stuff like that. Give us a dose of reality. Like what do you think, like a player like, say high school Trevor Lawrence, he's going to be the top of the heap in terms of marketability. How much money realistically do you think he can make on a yearly basis?
Well, okay. So the one thing that I think the biggest disconnect here is the disparity between a Trevor, I think Trevor is such a unique case, right? Versus even like a Spencer Rattler at this point. So I do think, that Trevor over the course of his career at Clemson would have, he'd be in the seven figures, he'd be making $1 million or so. But a lot of that would be trading card and memorabilia and appearances. And, I'd say this, maybe the way that we know Trevor, he might not have opted to do the time commitments that would have made him all that money, right? Like, if someone's going to want to hit that high end, like Adam said, like he really hit the nail on the head, they're going to have to work for it, right? I think you will have the star quarterbacks. There will be, probably 10 guys a year that are in that, high six-figure range, assuming they're signing. But I think what you got to look at is like the receivers. There won't be a receiver or running back that'll make more than 250. In a year, I would bet, right? And maybe that's lower than some end. And again, it could change, but I think you got to look at what guys are going into the NFL draft, right? Like a Jerry Jeudy might be in that range, but a second rounder isn't. And it's, if you're a kid who's in college who's going to be a second or third rounder, you're not going to make more than you would in the NFL, right? Yeah. Sorry, go.
Well, and people seem to think that it's going to be a recruiting, like businesses are going to pour money in, like, oh, Phil Knight's going to spend $1 million on every recruit. I mean, you work with companies that pay athletes to do endorsements. They're still businesses, right? I mean, and these are unproven high schoolers coming in
Yeah.
with really not a whole lot of marketability outside of our niche recruiting world until they actually are good, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about big publicly traded companies. They can't just, they can't, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They can't overpay these kids to go to their college just because the chairman of the board went there, kind of thing. And so,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
So yeah, like yeah, you're right. You're not going to see a bunch of college kids in a global Nike campaign anytime soon, or Adidas, or any other company for that matter. But I think, yeah, and then on the other hand, what Adam was talking about is why, the local car dealership, right? I think that's what everyone jumps to, is that the guy that owns, all the car dealerships in Tuscaloosa is going to start paying kids, crazy money to do something from. That's where the fair market value, or, that'll get capped by the NCAA, is the belief that they're basically going to have an assessment of what kids should be getting paid for certain deals, and you can't really go above that.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
there'll be no outliers, and that's the only way you get into the pay for play type thing. Is, like if one car dealership, if in Tuscaloosa your car deal was worth $500,000, but in Auburn it was only worth $25,000, right? That's where the out of whack kind of stuff would come into play, and the NCAA would not allow it. And the way it's likely going to happen is companies won't even pay kids directly. It's going to have to the money itself will have to flow through the NCAA the same way that it works with like the NFLPA and NFLPA partners.
That makes sense. So Gorney, this was not something the NCAA really wanted to do. The states kind of forced their hand. And you mentioned when we were talking earlier today that they're up against the clock here because a lot of these legislation is slated to go into effect soon. So I know everything's been, obviously thrown into a state of flux with what's going on with the virus, but what's the time? When is the NCAA going to establish who's aboard, what the fair market value is? What's the timeline on that?
Yeah, so there was a congressional hearing this week where Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, some representative from Ole Miss, the former Eric Winston, who was the former director of the NFLPA, and others were on that board. Dr. Michael Drake from Ohio State, who's now on the NCAA Board of Governors, and they were basically telling Congress that, well, first in January they're going to vote on these NIL rules. The Board of Governors is going to vote on these NIL rules. But before that, what they need over these next few months into next year is kind of a national framework, because the concern is that Florida's going to have their own rules, and the schools in that state, Florida, Miami, UCF, Florida State, are going to have their own rules, and California is going to have their own rules. The states are kind of forcing the hand of the NCAA to start really seriously thinking about this. And what the NCAA and kind of their member institutions and their commissioners are saying is, we need to go to Congress to start drafting legislation on this as fast as possible, so we have sort of a national framework, one rule for all of our member institutions to follow. They don't want state-by-state rules. That's going to be very complicated, not only for kids at those schools, but what happens if a kid transfers from Colorado to Miami, or from South Carolina to Tennessee, and there are different state rules. So that's really kind of the tricky thing. January is going to be very important, but these next few months from a congressional perspective is going to be super crucial. One other thing I want to say that I think is being discounted in this is just the time commitment that this is going to take college athletes, and the change that coaches are going to have to realize when this comes in. Coaches want kids in the film room many hours, in the weight room, and then some in the classroom. So maybe in that order too. So if a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields or a Penei Sewell or anybody across the country has to excuse themselves for 2 hours to go shoot a commercial, or be involved in a Twitter campaign, or to do whatever, selling t-shirts, or an autograph session during the weekend, or to spend a week in their hometown running summer camps, it's going to be a very delicate balance between the relationship between those players and those coaches for understanding that. So that's going to be really a mind shift on the coaches' part, who want to have really complete control over the day-to-day lives of these kids. It's going to be different. And I think over time, it's going to affect recruiting, in the sense that coaches who are more open to this and who develop those players to get NIL deals on campus, it's going to be like another part of the recruiting pitch. Not that we can help you get these, but we're open to the idea of you doing it for yourself.
Okay, so Zach, Gorney brings up a good point about the time management and stuff like that. Now, you've dealt with high school athletes, you deal with pro athletes, and even pro athletes that have like representation and like a person with them all the time, getting them to tweet the right thing at the right time. I mean, the hoops we jump through when a kid's announcing his commitment, even, and he says, "I'm doing it at 6," and then 6 comes and he doesn't do it, and he says, "I'll do it a little later," and it's just like it's all over the place. So, will the kids be able to? So, will a school have someone who coordinates all that stuff, essentially like a marketing person, or will the athletes be able to hire someone like you to do that, to do it for them? Will they be allowed to do that if the money's supposed to flow through the school?
So the school actually isn't allowed to facilitate anything.
Okay.
That's where you'd get into the recruiting inducements and things like that. And so the money flows through like the NCAA, the Indianapolis office, not the member institutions. So the school can't do it. So the kids will need to have some sort of representation, at least the high-end kids. The question is what will be allowed. That's another major thing that they're going through, because will there be an agent certification process like the NFLPA has for contract agents? Will there be the government, the state laws where they register agents that some of them have in place? But the truth is there's not a lot of, like, even on the pro level, there's not a lot of barriers to entry for marketing representation. And I think that gets really scary when you talk about dealing with these younger, 18, 19-year-old kids. And, by the time a family goes through the draft process and they vet the contract agents and everything, they get exposed to so much that they're able to kind of make informed decisions. If the NCAA is saying that a kid can't have any representation before they get to college, but they're clearly going to need representation once they get to college, they're going to be rushing these decisions. And, you could both have people that are with bad intentions, or even people with good intentions that just don't really understand the business, that end up costing the kid a lot of money long term. So I think, figuring out how the representation process and certification, all that will work, is another one of the biggest kind of questions that has to be answered. And again, I'm sorry for saying that everything still needs to be answered, but like Adam said, like, that's where everything is. Like, anybody who claims to know exactly what's going to happen is just lying, because the people that are making the decisions haven't figured out what's going to happen.
So we know that social media is going to be the key moneymaker for any of these people. They're essentially athletic influencers now. So when you hear, olds like me and Gorney talk about this on social media, especially like the college football media, they're like, their frame of reference is, like you said, car dealerships or whatever. But in the meantime, someone like Justin Flo has 300,000 Instagram followers or whatever. He could be doing what, like a workout, like a protein shake type thing. He's going to be doing that. That's where the money is actually going to be made for a lot of these people, right?
Yeah, and it's especially because with like look at the Instagram influencers, a lot of their business is like commission, right? It's so you won't just be getting paid to sponsor a protein company. It'll be, you get hey, we'll give you $2,000 for this post, and then do a swipe up link, and you get 20 to 30% of all sales, right? That's when kids can start to see more revenue. But again, there's from the marketing agent standpoint, there's the fine line of, you need to keep your page authentic to you and your brand, not just, selling it off and everything's a sales link. And then you start to lose your following and your influence ultimately.
Right.
The other big one will be trading cards and memorabilia. Like autographs have value. You can look online right now. Some of these kids have signed things in the past as high school or college athletes, and you have Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence autographs in like the hundreds of dollars. So imagine people are able to pay them for that, right? They won't be getting paid that much, but they're not going to get paid $100 a signature, but they could be getting, $10, $20 a signature for 5,000 signatures. You do that math, that adds up quick.
Right. Especially we saw guys in the past like Johnny Football and Todd Gurley get busted for doing it during the season. But to give you an idea, look, you reminded me while we were sitting here. I looked at my desk. This is how little influence you have to get free stuff. I mean, the green screen's throwing it
Yeah,
off.
it's not.
Yeah. Anyway, it's from Manscaped, some razor company, sent me like hundreds of dollars worth of stuff, and they wanted me to do a post like you mentioned, Zach. They're like they sent me clothes and product, and out of nowhere. But I realized I probably couldn't do it because
Well, Woody, one of the examples that they used at the congressional hearing that a law professor from the University of Baltimore said was the UCLA gymnast who did that video to the
Yep.
Michael Jackson song, and it went viral, got 115 million views on YouTube. And for that, she was paid 0 cents, not a single penny. So if she just got a sliver of that advertising revenue from those views from the UCLA gymnast webpage, she would have significant money. So just think of anything possible where you can make money off your name, image, likeness. The question is who's going to have enough time to be able to put this together, because you're going to have a team of people doing that for you.
Well, I think the one thing though is you hit it there. If you were, if they truly wanted to maximize it, they would need a team and they would need these big commitments. But it's not really even about that. It's just about, letting them earn something, letting them earn.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a college kid and you can make $50,000 a year, that's life changing. Like and for a lot of the situation where these kids are coming from, that money isn't just going to be used to support them. It's potentially going to family members and things like that, or even if it's just enough money so they can pay for their families to travel to games, right? Like, let's make that a break-even cost. So it is just, that will make a big difference to these kids, and they don't need to sacrifice time. They don't need to be missing practice or anything like that. But then, I think, the examples that I always use are like UCLA gymnasts, Penn State wrestling, Nebraska volleyball. Like, it's not just going to be football players that are able to, and basketball players that are able to make a lot of money off this, or, good money off this.
yeah, I notice a lot of female athletes having like college softball players having hundreds of thousands of followers, like, or on TikTok or on Instagram. And essentially you have to imagine, like, if they're endorsing even something related to their sport, or swimwear, my skincare routine, or whatever, like it's not just, there's money to be made across all sports. I think some people discount, like, oh, well, nobody would watch a TV commercial with the Oregon third baseman from the softball team. It's like, well, no one. I have a friend who went to every Oregon game last year, home and away, and he sent me a text of the mock draft, and he said, "Who's this Oregon guy that's in the top 10?" And it was Penei Sewell. He didn't even know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no. So I'd say this is my hottest take as it relates to NIL stuff. Maybe Justin Herbert would have made less money last year than Sabrina and than Haley Cruz. So they're,
Yeah, Haley Cruz is who I was thinking about with having like 200,000.
Yeah, there are two kind of schools of thinking on this. One is from kind of the legislators and the chancellors of schools, and as Woody would say, the older people who Michael Drake said at the congressional hearing that 3 or 4 Ohio State players would make significant money from this. And then the other side is that the backup walk-on guard at Nebraska is going to make a significant amount of money because he's the biggest name, biggest show in his small town, and 500 kids are going to show up to his summer camp and get his signature. And so it was interesting because, women's sports are going to get a huge portion of this because there's a significant interest, especially in women's basketball, women's gymnastics, and other sports. All these schools that think this is just football and men's basketball related because those are the sports that make the most money at those universities, I think are dramatically undervaluing what these other sports can make. Now, no one's going to make the money that the highest end football player can make, but there are significant fan bases out there that are going to pay to see a lot of these people in commercials, or pay to meet them, or pay for their autograph, or whatever else down the line. And it's going to make things a lot better for those sports too, because a lot of little girls, I have 3 nieces, all of them go to the UCLA gymnastics meets all the time. They would definitely pay to go and talk for 5 minutes with one of those gymnasts. And across the country, I think we're going to see that.
Yeah, and you have a lot of women's sports where college is really the pinnacle of popularity, right? I mean, and the most popular women's basketball team in the country is probably still UConn, not a WNBA team, not anything, you know. So I think that's the other thing too is super unfair. You know, when they try to say that it's going to be unfair to women because men will make more, and I say it's the reverse. You know, any man that'll make more in college, you know, than these top women athletes are men that are going to go on to play in the NBA or NFL. So they were always going to make more, and they still had an opportunity to make more after college, versus the women that they're robbing of this opportunity to profit off their name and likeness. These 4 years for a lot of them was the prime opportunity, and maybe the only opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the same will go for certain athletes in football that don't, you know, I mean, imagine how much money Tim Tebow would have made or whatever. And obviously he didn't have a great pro career. So same with like Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, I mean, what about like an Eric Crouch, right? Like
Right.
guys like that, right? Like there's the people, you know, college stars that just don't make it, right? And yeah.
So we were having a discussion earlier with Mike Farrell, and we were trying to say, oh, let's name the 10 players who are most likely to make money off this. And he starts naming, you know, the 10 best players. Like you said, Justin Herbert. Okay. Like Justin Herbert had no social media presence, had no personality that was discernible whatsoever. You know? So like you know, you don't see kids posting pictures of Justin Herbert as like they're starting. Now Lamar Jackson in college, yeah, amazing. I mean, everybody loved him. I mean, like Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence, but it's not just going to be the 10 best players. It's going to be there are even like that kicker at UCF who had a YouTube channel, and he had tens of thousands of followers, and they stripped his eligibility because he was making money shooting funny videos in the locker room. Or like a guy like, do you guys remember Keyshawn Kai Young? Do you remember him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He went to USC. He's never really played college football, but I mean, he was like a Vine superstar at that time, and he was like hilarious, and he probably could have made a ton of money. Like, so and like Gorney said, the smaller towns, Nebraska, Tuscaloosa, Oxford, Mississippi, you know, like those are the guys that are going to make money compared to, you know, someone who's in LA or New York or whatever, where
yes,
you know,
Zach opened my eyes to this, because when I went into this, I was like, the big media markets, the big city teams, USC, Miami, even a place like Austin, Texas, those were going to be the schools of the players that really made the most money and made the most of this. But as I kind of went along and talked to him, and he said, you know, I think the people that are going to make the money here are the small, really football sports hungry towns, the Lincoln, Nebraskas, and the State College, Pennsylvanias, and even in Ann Arbor, Michigan is kind of in a sweet spot because it's a suburb of a big city with a huge industry, but also has a small town feel. I think those are the schools that could really profit off this the most, because football matters there. He used an example of, you know, you can get Jennifer Aniston or Brad Pitt in a commercial in Los Angeles. Does anyone really care about USC's starting wide receiver or Jared Goff? You know, you can get Jared Goff in a commercial. So I think that is important. And I also think and he also said having like a unique and genuine personality, something that really interests you. He pointed to Carson Wentz's hunting with his brother. That brings in advertising dollars. That Juju Smith-Schuster's gaming interest, that brings in advertising dollars. So don't be fake about it, and don't just create something, but be your genuine self, and then the marketing dollars will follow from that.
Yeah, we've seen guys who aren't the top, you know, talents have huge followings in the past, and it would be paying off for them in this scenario. Before we kind of wrap up, another thing I've been seeing people, like, especially tweeting at us, like, you better enjoy it now because you're going to have to pay high school athletes to take their picture and write about them. And it's like, I don't know how that got lumped into it, but my question will be, can these prospects, especially we saw Bryce Brown try to do it way back in the day, where he had his own website where he was charging people money to read about his recruitment. could we see something like that? I guess we'll start with Gorney. Will high schoolers be able to capitalize off of their recruitment? And is that going to be decided on the state level? Is that an NCAA issue? How's that handled?
Yeah, like we talked about a lot of things, that still remains, I think, unclear. What the NCAA and what Congress is going to try to do is to make anything that's recruiting induced or pay for play completely out of bounds. And if you want to do that, if you want to play that game, then you're not going to be welcome to play at one of our member institutions. So if a Texas A&M booster wants to put up a website for one of the top quarterbacks in Texas and pay him $50,000 to put content on there, I don't think that's going to be possible, even if the kid is not under NCAA rules yet. So I think all of those schemes or strategies or whatever you'd like to call them are going to be frowned upon. I wouldn't say illegal, but certainly frowned upon as this kind of gets worked through. Anything where it could be even seen as I'm paying you to go to a certain school, no matter how old you are, is not going to be allowed probably.
Well, and actually, so taking one step back, the reason why that specifically will be banned is because kids aren't going to be allowed to monetize their name and likeness before entering college, is what they're saying. So
Okay.
then you're going to, from everything that I've been told, all of the existing legislation that is being pushed says that the kids basically have to enroll with their, what would have been considered amateur status. Maybe that changes. I hope it does, honestly. But as of now, high school kids won't be able to monetize their name and likeness, which is.
So we get into a sticky situation there, though, and this is kind of what I've learned through this whole thing, is that one question leads to 20 others. Sierra Wright is playing LeBron James's son in Space Jam 2. The director of that movie, let's say, went to UCLA. What's to stop that director from paying Sierra Wright $1 million instead of $250,000 with the agreement that he were to go to UCLA? I mean, it's just a very complicated scenario that is endless. And that's why I think the NCAA said, hey, to get our hands around this, we need more help. And Congress is pretty big to deal with something like that.
And actually, and the one thing I'll say is, I have actually bad news for your haters, Woody. Rankings will matter more than ever once kids are able to monetize their name and likeness, right? Because if you're a 5-star, that gives you clout, right? That increases your marketability. I mean, I think honestly, for rivals and your competitors, this is name and likeness rules changing is 100% a great thing for your business, because you are going to basically set the market for some of these kids. Like we talked about, it's not all based on, their play, but, being a 5-star will absolutely increase the value of a kid, or, being a 4-star instead of a 3-star, because that gets the fan base excited, right? It's not like every Nebraska fan is going in and breaking down film of every kid, right? If a kid's a 5-star, they want him and they love him, right? So I think, honestly, you guys will be more powerful than ever.
Oh man, that sounds great. Especially the people running the social media accounts, because you're gonna want to be going to camps. You're gonna want to be going viral. You want to have viral plays. You're gonna want to have be featured on other accounts that are going to grow your following. So I like that, Zach.
That's my shameless plug for you guys is, look, any kid who hears this, be nice to the media. You need them, right? You need them more than ever, right? So make sure they, do that interview, so then they'll tweet it from the main rivals account and they'll tag you on Instagram and all those things. And, you'll thank Woody and Adam later.
It was funny. Real quick, I actually was tweeting out the Elite 11 video, and the Tennessee quarterback commit, I tweeted it out and he responded, "Please tag me in all posts."
Oh yeah, let's go.
Because I just put his name and I didn't find his Twitter, so gotta tag him. That's going to be the other thing. Please, sir, can you tag me and everything?
Oh yeah,
tweet about me.
The tags will definitely be required. It's funny because you joked about earlier how hard it is to get some like NFL vets to do things. The truth is that the younger kids are so much more, not just tech savvy, but they're kind of social natives, and they understand brand building online kind of innately. right? Because again, you have random high schoolers with a bunch of followers, not just athletes. Like, so these kids, they know to make sure to ask to tag, right? Like, I don't think every NFL player would have immediately hit you to do that, right?
Right. I just remember like us being at events when you were working at Adidas, and me being like, which NFL players are coming? And it's just kind of like, oh, well, these guys are supposed to come. We'll see if they show up or not. I distinctly remember Alvin Kamara just driving like a Hummer into the middle of the field with Quavo or whatever in the middle of an event. He was like 3 hours late, and it was like everyone was thrilled to see both of them. But yeah, it's definitely missed his call time by a few hours. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate it. You want to read Adam Gorney's series over? We're probably going to break up this conversation a little bit in video form, but Adam has been working on this very hard. And if you want to follow Zach, he's always talking about this stuff as well. Is his name at Zach Soskin on Twitter. So, all right, guys. Thanks a lot for hanging out, and have a great weekend.
No problem. Thanks for having me.